Hello and welcome to my Sonification project. So for my Sonification I built a game which relies heavily on an API calling the weather from different locations around the world. So without further ado, you'll see the city there being printed on the screen. That is the city we have landed in our spaceship from the future. So if we head down here, it's the main spaceship. Nothing too flashy. It was a free asset I got on the Unreal Store. Just gonna flick the lights off here so we can see the screen better. So this is our weather device. Okay. If I click on the help here, you can basically have a read of the mission. In the interest of speed, I'm gonna quickly exit off this. If you want to pause the screen and have a quick read. Okay, cool. So after reading that, here is the current weather conditions to where we have landed in Kuwait City. So here's the temperature. So basically the API is converting this to sound. Basically we can't make any contact with anyone, so we're heavily relying on this data device to pull sounds for what the weather is. These are the sounds right here. The current weather outside being transmitted into sound, and these will change depending on what the temperature is. So for example, if we're really hot, as we move down and get colder, for the wind, .0 mph wind to 70 mph winds. So basically, we have to head into the current conditions. Let's take UV for example. We'll head back to our references. And we can test our results here. Ideally we need to get all 5 lined up, but we're just for testing purposes. It's going to print there. Wow, okay, we got it right first time. So you can see that top left UV is correct. Let's try another one, humidity. So we're trying to find that sound. No. It's quite hard, so I'm going to go back into the current conditions and... Okay, it's a lot lower. Back into my reference there. There we go, that's it. Cool. So basically, yeah, we will run through all of these and basically until they're all correct. So yeah, after we've completed that, we'll just flick the lights back on. We'll head back over here where there's going to be a selection of clothing basically that we need to choose for the mission. Because the conditions on Earth are so absolutely wild right now, we need to get the right conditions, the right clothes for the mission based on what the weather data device is telling us. So if it's freezing outside, we're going to need some sort of heavy ice suit to head out there, and amongst other different pieces of clothing like UV umbrellas or whatever we might need, I don't know. But if we have the wrong clothes on basically and we step out, yeah, the mission's compromised and you're going to die. So yeah, that is the game. So yeah, we are relying heavily on sound basically to complete our mission here. I thought it was a really cool concept, and yeah, we're going to head into FMOD now. How we mapped all these sounds. So the sounds I used were from a Space Simulator sample pack I created last year, and basically we've added a bunch of effects to them. Okay, And so here are the effects. So this is humidity, for example, and we've added a flanger and a pitch shifter. So as I mentioned, the names on here must match up exactly to what's in the parameter on FMOD, sorry, in Unreal, and then they're basically going to match up. And yeah, so here we go. The temperature, so the average is basically 19. We go from -5 to 40, and we start off in the middle there. And so yeah. Just applied a bunch of different effects. So some of them need more than others to manipulate the sound. For example, down this lower end here, that's quite hard. Between -5 and 0, we're not seeing too much difference there. That's going to be only experienced players that are going to be able to get that right. And again, I talked about a difficulty setting before. You know, the higher the difficulty, the lower margin. So we might only get between here for high difficulty. But for easy, we might go all the way from -5 to like 5, for example, and go in different increments to make the game harder or easier. I think it's UV. And all these values are based on averages, basically. I took the coldest places, for example, a -5, and the hottest places registered were 40. Some of them do obviously creep above 40 in different seasons, but 40 is sort of, you can't have it too high, basically, because everything in England is going to sound, depending where you are in the world, too samey, you know, between that sort of, you know, 1 in 10 degree. So I couldn't go too high on the other end. I couldn't use, for example, world records of how high they are. The higher it would go, it would basically it's going to cap at 40. If it's 50 degrees somewhere, or if it's -20 somewhere, it's going to be at them hard limits. So yeah, that's basically how FMOD's working. So it all starts off with this get weather blueprint. Okay. In fact, stop again there. An absolute monster of a blueprint which went through several iterations, and I'll cover these at the end, but may as well dive into what we ended up on, basically. So it's custom event, and it's going to print the string of the city, basically. I'll come to that in a second, but this is the VARREST subsystem, which you have to get off Unreal Engine Marketplace for free, actually. That's going to get the request. We're going to process the URL, bind it to an event called weather completed, get that response, okay, and then we're going to get it as a field, okay, and that's the current there, which we'll see more on the website that I used. That is basically the text I'm saying I want to use this from this point of the data. We're going to start breaking it down, okay. Before I get to that, actually, I thought I'd mention the API. So here's the API, okay, and here's the API key, right? I wanted to break down these two pieces of data, basically, so we can basically have an infinite game here. So if you see there, I could type in the city I wanted, and I could type in the API, and I play the same city over and over again. However, for replayability, and I thought it'd be cool to basically randomize. So here we go. Randomize a whole bunch of cities. So we've got 26 cities around the world with really different variation temperatures. When we start, we're going to pull a new city off that same API key, basically. So yeah, so this is where the middleware part enters, basically. So yeah, essentially that's the API. There's the key. Okay, there's the data. Okay, it's coming in over here, and now we're going to break it down. Okay, we've got 5 here, different fields: temperature, wind, pressure, humidity, and UV. We'll just do temperature. So we're going to set the temperature here, print string. So here's the most important part for FMOD is the parameter, okay, and this must be exactly the same as the parameter in here, temp in lowercase, okay. Now we're going to do once when we play this because we want to save it, okay, because previously as we went back to this different widget screen, which I'll just pull up very quickly, as we went back and forth between the conditions menu and the reference menu, the values were saving, so basically you couldn't tell what the original value was. Okay, you'd mess around with the slider, come back in here, and it would be the same value. So that obviously wasn't good. So we have to save it. Basically, we have to save that value, and there's basically a big chain of saves up here, which is referenced in basically all the different blueprints, which we'll get to in a second. So that's essentially the chain, and I'll just briefly talk about this is how we started. How you can see the URL is just baked in there for the same level every time. We've got Perth in there, one of the countries I first experimented with. There's a fair few videos on making all this, and I had to watch a good few of them to land on basically the right result, which I could manipulate. Because some of them you couldn't quite edit in the way I wanted to. This was another way of calling the strings, which I didn't end up using in the end, because we found that this was a much better way of working, basically. A very important piece of gameplay. The sliders, which moves the text, is basically set here, and that's going to map it to the slider. So when you move the slider, it's going to tell you what the temperature is going to be, basically. And in the graph here, again, values that got saved. Again, here's the parameters for FMOD. Every time the slide is set up, basically. And here is the nearly equal float I was talking about earlier. So we've got 3 degrees in there. As I mentioned, we can make that a lot harder, putting it 0.1 or 10 to be easier. But 3 sort of, after a lot of play testing, is a value that I figured worked really well. So we pull the nearly equals into format text, and basically that's why they're printing to screen here, saying is it correct or is it incorrect, and we're going to print the result of everyone, basically, whether it's true or false. So yeah, that's the API website that I used. I managed to get a free one. You get a million calls a month there. Brilliant for News 32. No worries. So, and this is where the testing got done. So there's my key. Let's put a city, for example. Let's put Sheffield in. And this is, there we go. There's that word current. You remember here we're looking for that word to break down our data. Okay, and then into the sequence, we had to look for that word, and from then here is basically all the parameters. I didn't use condition, just use these 5 here, which was cool too. And yeah, I could basically test out all the different conditions of cities around the world through here to make sure that the values were different enough, basically. Yeah, there we go. Thank you for joining me.